the second pick will be made by the San Antonio Spurs, and that means that the number 1 pick in the 2025 NBA draft goes to the Dallas Mavericks.
Seeing the Mavs come away from the draft lottery with the first overall pick after making one of the most shadiest and idiotic trades of all time made a lot of fans ask the same question. So the NBA draft lottery is actually rigged? Always has been. Memes aside, one look at the history of the NBA shows more than a few instances where the ping pong balls fell in a way that was just too perfect to be believable. Dallas getting the first pick after trading Luka Doncic in one of the most suspicious trades in history is the latest burst of fuel to that fire. So the question is, does the league occasionally rig the results of its draft lottery to create a certain storyline or to repay a debt it has towards a team? Let's examine some of the most controversial draft lottery results of all time. By the end of this video, you'll know all there is to know about the lottery's many controversies. Now, why would the NBA risk its reputation, and why would the people in charge risk their careers by rigging the draft lottery? As Ayesha Curry once famously tweeted, "For money or for ratings? I'm not sure which." This would mean pissing off billionaires who own teams that are potentially cheated out of better draft picks, and those individuals have more than enough money and legal firepower to make your life a living hell no matter who you are. It would require all the team owners to be in on the plot, or at least indifferent to it. Whenever a team gets sold, the new owners would have to get on board as well. The only things that could make this remotely possible is the money that the league generates as a whole, and the knowledge that while your team may get screwed one year, the league could make it up to you in the future. Many NBA team owners are passive when it comes to involvement in the teams they own. They just want to know if the number in the revenue column is bigger than the number in the cost column at the end of the year. Any owner trying to expose potential rigging of the draft lottery would be a threat to the money coming in. So they would not only incur the wrath of the other 29 billionaires in the room, but they would also be hurting their own bottom line. Is it possible for such a silent agreement to exist between team owners? Sure, as long as it makes everyone money. But how likely is it? Not very. The lottery system itself was instituted in 1985, and wouldn't you know it, the very first instance of the draft lottery may have been the first instance of rigging the lottery as well. That first lottery didn't feature ping pong balls, but envelopes containing team names to determine who gets the first pick. Georgetown center Patrick Ewing was the consensus number 1 pick that year, and he was considered the next face of the league. The New York Knicks, the sole team from the league's largest market, were bad, and the league supposedly wanted to revitalize them by giving them the most anticipated rookie in years. According to the theories, the envelope containing the Knicks logo was placed in a freezer prior to the lottery so that Commissioner David Stern would have a way to identify it without it being obvious to the public. Sure enough, Stern drew the right envelope and Ewing went to the nation's largest market, creating a huge media frenzy around the Knicks and by extension around the NBA. The envelope system meant that each of the 14 lottery teams had the same chance to get the first pick. The first version of the odd system we know today was introduced in 1990. 1,000 4-digit combinations are distributed among each of the 14 lottery teams, with teams that had the worst records getting more combinations. Ping pong balls are then drawn to determine the pick order. But here's the kicker. The lottery process itself isn't televised. It's conducted behind closed doors, and the announcement of the results is the only televised part of the lottery. But what happens in the secret lottery room? NBA officials, media members, and the representatives of each participating team attend the drawing, which works like this. The balls are mixed for 20 seconds, after which the first ball is drawn. The remaining balls are drawn after a 10-second mixing period until 4 balls are drawn. The team with the drawn combination is given the first overall pick. The balls are then returned to the drum, and the process is repeated for picks 2 through 4. If the same team comes up more than once, the result is disregarded, and the balls are mixed again. A timekeeping official who is facing away from the drum lets the machine operator know when to stop the mixing and draw a ball. A representative of Ernst & Young, an independent accounting firm, is overseeing the entire process, and he is responsible for placing the team logos in the appropriate envelopes and sealing those envelopes. NBA security escorts him to the announcement room where he hands the envelopes off for the deputy commissioner to read out on air. During the televised portion of the lottery, you see the deputy commissioner open these envelopes as he announces the picks starting from number 14 in front of a second set of team representatives. Having so many eyes on the whole process would make you think that it's nearly impossible to cheat or rig anything. The only people aware of the lottery results are the people who were inside of the room during the draw. Everyone else, including the deputy commissioner, will hear who got which pick only when the envelopes are opened. But what makes people suspect there's foul play involved? Real life examples. In 2016, Dikembe Mutombo infamously tweeted congratulations to the Philadelphia 76ers for getting the first overall pick hours before the lottery draw even took place. How did Mutombo know? We have no clue. He quickly posted a follow-up tweet claiming he had misread an email he received from the team. Allegedly, a 76ers staffer emailed him to ask if he could congratulate the team if they won the lottery. Mutombo misread the email and he sent out congratulations prematurely. It's a reasonable explanation, but there's a decent theory behind why the Sixers got that pick. Firing Sam Hinkie after he spent years running The Process, a run of trades and tanking spanning several seasons designed to build a juggernaut throughout the draft. Many people hated him for it, accusing him of popularizing tanking. To be fair, tanking was a thing long before Hinkie, but the on-court product was beyond unwatchable. There was pressure from the league for the Sixers to fire Hinkie, and if the theories are to be believed, the first pick was compensation for getting rid of him. The official story was that Hinkie stepped down on his own, but few people believe it. The Orlando Magic joined the league in 1989 as an expansion team, and their first few seasons were just not good. Actually, both Florida teams sucked for the first few years, but the Heat didn't have a lottery pick in the 1992 draft. There's a theory floating around that the league needed to show that an expansion team in Florida could work, so it gave the first overall pick to the only Florida team it could, and that's how Orlando got Shaq. They went from 21-61 to a 41-41 record in their first year with Shaq, and they became a powerhouse soon after. What lends credibility to this theory is Shaq, who claimed that he was approached by David Stern a few months before the draft lottery. Stern said he was very excited for Shaq's arrival in the NBA and asked him whether he wanted to play in hot or cold weather. Shaq didn't think much of it and said he'd prefer hot weather. Orlando's a pretty warm place, and this one definitely has some legs to stand on. Two separate theories revolve around LeBron. As the most hyped prospect in history at that point, having him play for his hometown team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, was supposedly too good of a storyline to pass up. Cleveland famously got the first overall pick in the 2003 draft, and you know the rest. This is one of the weaker conspiracies since the Cavs had the worst record in the league the year prior. The second theory claims that the NBA either actively facilitated or simply welcomed the creation of the Wade, James, and Bosh Big Three in Miami. Never before have three superstars entering their primes joined forces, and the media was running wild. Of course, this meant that both Cleveland and Toronto would lose their star players, but Cleveland would clearly be taking the bigger hit. To compensate them for it, the league allegedly awarded Cleveland the first overall pick yet again in 2011, and that landed them Kyrie Irving. The Cavs had the second worst record in the league before they won the lottery, but here's the thing. The Clippers actually won the lottery with just a 2.8% chance of doing so. Cleveland owned their pick, and that's how they got the number one overall. Cleveland's actual pick was fourth overall. The hardcore conspiracy crowd would call it a misdirection and a cover-up, but it was probably one of the more legit lotteries on this list. Now let's get into some real shenanigans. In 2011, New Orleans was about to trade Chris Paul to the Lakers, but the trade was vetoed by NBA Commissioner David Stern, who was de facto the Hornets team owner since the team was briefly owned by the league. The trade was vetoed for basketball reasons, which amounted to one part pressure from owners of the other teams who were interested in Paul, and one part of the return for New Orleans in that trade not being good for raising the team's value. The league wanted to maximize the team's value because it was looking to sell it. Taking on old and injured players without any draft compensation for probably the best pure point guard in the league isn't exactly a great way to get potential buyers to pay more. CP3 was traded to the Clippers soon after for a slightly better return that included a first-round pick. The Hornets were sold in April of 2012, and just a month later, they won the first overall pick in the lottery, which they used on Anthony Davis. Given how the Hornets weren't exactly the most exciting team in the NBA, the first pick could very well have been an under-the-table part of the deal when the team was sold. To be fair, they had a 13.7% chance of landing the top pick, but the coincidence is too big to ignore. Another theory revolves around New Orleans and the trade that sent AD to the Lakers. The Lakers are one of the NBA's most storied franchises, and they straight up sucked for years after Kobe tore his Achilles in 2013. A coaching change in 2016 didn't do much, although it might be interesting to know that Magic Johnson promised that the team would get a top 3 pick in the draft when he was interviewing Luke Walton for the head coach position that year. They ended up with the second overall pick. It's also interesting that this year was the year when Kobe retired. That tangent aside, the Lakers were desperately trying to trade for AD, but Pelicans GM Dell Demps was not willing to play ball with LA. AD wanted a trade, and his camp was adamant that he would only play for LA and would not re-sign with any other team if they were to trade for him. Demps was fired in February of 2019, and the Lakers instantly became contenders after completing the trade for AD in June. A good Lakers team is great for the NBA's ratings, and the league allegedly manipulated the draft lottery that year. Zion Williamson was the consensus first overall pick and a supposed generational talent. The Pelicans had a 6% chance of winning the top pick, and that's exactly what they got. The only major wrench in the theory is the timeline. The lottery took place in May, while the trade was completed in June. June. However, it was widely believed that any team that won the first overall pick would use it as a trade chip for AD. Giving the pick to the Pelicans would kickstart the team's rebuild and ensure that no other team could use it to snatch Anthony away from the Pelicans. And now we get to what's probably the reason why you clicked on this video. Without giving any other team a chance, the Mavs traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers for AD, a pack of chips, and a paperclip, and then won the draft lottery despite having just a 1.8% chance of doing so. What are the odds of that happening? Well, the odds are exactly 1.8, which isn't a lot. The entire trade was surrounded by conspiracy speculation from the day it happened. The trade itself was a nuclear bomb, but the level of secrecy it was done under was the real story. After the hauls that teams got for Rudy Gobert and KD, it's crazy to even imagine what Dallas could have gotten had Luka ever hit the open market. It would be a bidding war unlike any we've ever seen before, but they made only one call and demanded total secrecy from the Lakers. The Lakers front office thought that the offer was a joke, not because it was bad, but because it was too good to be true. One of the greatest offensive talents of all time who has yet to hit his prime for Anthony Street Clothes Davis. LA was in 5th place in the West, and things were not looking great. The league allegedly wanted to make them more competitive and force Dallas to make the trade. The optics weren't improved by coach Jason Kidd looking absolutely miserable during press conferences after the trade and GM Nico Harrison giving answers that made absolutely no sense. This was a ridiculously one-sided trade, and the tinfoil hat version of the story is that the first overall pick was a way for the league to pay Dallas back for helping them generate insane media buzz and storylines by sending Luka to LA. The whole thing looks shady as hell, so let's take a closer look. The Mavs had only the 8th best record in the West at the time of the trade. Davis got hurt during his very first game, which didn't help their postseason hopes. By the time Kyrie tore his ACL in March, the Mavs were clinging to the number 10 spot in the conference. They held onto that spot by the end of the season and managed to win the first game of the play-in tournament against Sacramento. Had they beaten Memphis in the second game, they would have made the playoffs, and they would not be a lottery team. Fortunately, they lost that game as Davis got injured once again and they remained in the lottery. Nobody could have predicted that Kyrie would tear his ACL and that AD would get injured in his very first game. Without these issues, Dallas would likely have made the playoffs. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for the league to promise the first overall pick to a team that's not expected to be in the lottery. They could have possibly tanked their way into the lottery, but the fan base would probably riot, given how the entire AD trade was framed as a win now move and Fire Nico became the city's official greeting. There's a sense that something sinister was happening behind the scenes of every single draft lottery on this list, but a deeper examination finds reasons to believe that each of those was just a crazy coincidence. Maybe that ability to offer plausible explanations is what makes the NBA so good at rigging the lottery, and maybe the coincidences are exactly that and nothing more. Every controversial lottery is ultimately good for the NBA because it keeps the media talking about them. When Dallas got that first pick, it was all that every sports show on TV could talk about for days, and the dust still hasn't settled. If we're being honest, there are too many moving pieces for the rigging to both happen and remain a secret for 40 years. But hey, the possibility will never stop being exciting no matter how unlikely it is. But what do you think? Is the lottery rigged after all, and are all of us being taken for a ride? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.